They thought they had won. They thought you were finished. The trap was set. The bait was placed, and they waited with smug smiles, convinced you'd walk right in, blind and helpless. You were nothing to them. Just another pawn to be sacrificed, another step in their ladder to power. They whispered behind your back, laughed in your face, and sharpened their knives when you weren't looking. They made you the fool in their story. But what they didn't know was that you weren't the prey. You saw it all. Every smirk, every lie, every twisted manipulation they tried to weave around you. You saw the way they planned your downfall, how they delighted in the thought of watching you struggle, watching you beg. And yet you smiled, because while they thought they were in control, you were already 3 steps ahead. They mistook your silence for weakness, your patience for fear. But you were watching, listening, preparing. Now, it was time to turn the game around. The betrayal didn't happen all at once. It was a slow burn. At first, they acted like friends, allies, people you could trust. They cheered for you in public, but behind closed doors they plotted. They laid the foundation for your fall, brick by brick, waiting for the perfect moment to pull the floor out from under you. And when they finally made their move, they did it with a smile. It was supposed to be a simple plan. Humiliate you, corner you, destroy your name, your reputation. They fed lies to those around you, twisted the truth, and stood back to watch the chaos unfold. But here's where they made their first mistake. They underestimated you, because instead of crumbling, you watched. Instead of breaking, you learned. Every time they pushed you down, you got back up stronger. Every time they tried to bury you, you rose with more fire in your veins. And most importantly, you let them believe they were winning. See, the best revenge isn't anger. It's not screaming or fighting or begging for justice. The best revenge is silence. The best revenge is patience. So, you waited. You watched as they built their tower higher, as their confidence grew. You let them think they were invincible, untouchable. You let them enjoy the illusion of their success. Let them gloat in the false belief that they had outsmarted you. But you knew their weaknesses, their arrogance, their greed, their hunger for power. You knew that the higher they climbed, the harder they'd fall. And when the time was right, you gave them the smallest push. Not much, just enough to shake the foundation, just enough to make them doubt, to turn on each other, just enough to let their own lies collapse in on themselves. And that was when the real fun began. At first, it was subtle, little things. Conversations that didn't add up, trust that started to crack. The people they had manipulated, the ones they had used to turn against you, started to see the truth. One by one, their allies disappeared. One by one, their lies came back to haunt them. They tried to control the damage, but it was too late, because you had planted the seed of doubt. And now, they were trapped in the very game they had created. The walls started closing in. They panicked, scrambling to hold on to what little power they had left. But the harder they fought, the faster they fell. And as they looked around, searching for someone to blame, searching for a way out, they saw you, standing there, watching, smiling, because they had set the trap for you. But now, it was their turn to fall. The first crack is always the quietest. A whisper in the dark, a shadow shifting where there should be none. They don't notice it at first, too caught up in their own game, too high on the thrill of believing they had won. But you knew better. You had watched them lay every brick of their empire of lies. You had let them build higher, stronger, bolder, because the higher the climb, the more devastating the fall. And now, the cracks were spreading, one betrayal at a time, one exposed lie at a time, one shattered illusion at a time. It started small. The people who once trusted them began to question. The once loyal allies hesitated. The whispers they had used to poison your name, they turned against them, because power built on deception is fragile. And once people start doubting, the whole structure starts shaking. You watched as the ones they had manipulated, the ones who had turned against you, began to see the truth. Not all at once. No! That would be too easy. The real punishment was in the slow, creeping realization. The realization that they had been pawns in someone else's game. The realization that they had been used, just as you had been. And now, the same trap that had been meant for you was waiting for its real victims. Panic. That's what set in next. You saw it in their eyes. That flicker of doubt. That second of hesitation when they realized things weren't going as planned. They tried to hold on to their control, to their influence, but the strings were slipping through their fingers. And you simply waited, because the best part of the downfall isn't the fall itself. It's the moment they realize they're falling, the moment they realize they are powerless to stop it. They scrambled, grasping at their lies, twisting the story, trying to find a new scapegoat. But the web they had spun was too tangled now. Every move they made only tightened the noose. And one by one, the people they had once controlled turned away. No more blind followers. No more willing accomplices. No more protection. Now, they were standing on their own, surrounded by the ruins of the empire they had built with deception and betrayal. And for the first time, they were afraid. You felt no need to rush. Revenge wasn't about striking first. It was about letting them destroy themselves. Letting them look in the mirror and see the monster they had become. Letting them hear the whispers. Feel the coldness of being alone. Taste the bitterness of their own medicine. The same way they had made you feel. But the difference between you and them? You grew from it. You sharpened your mind, your instincts. You learned the hard lesson of patience, of control. But they never expected to fall. They never learned resilience. And now, the fear in their eyes, the desperation in their voices, it was the sweetest form of justice. You had the power now, the power to destroy them completely, to expose every lie, every scheme, every cruel trick they had used. But true power is knowing when to let go, because they weren't worth your energy anymore. The battle had already been won. Not with force, not with rage, but with the simple, undeniable truth. The world saw them for what they were now. There was no escape, no redemption, and as they stood there, broken, defeated, trapped in the consequences of their own actions, you simply smiled. They set the trap for you. Now, they were the ones who had fallen into it. And you walked away, free, stronger, untouchable. The silence was deafening. No more whispers, no more laughter at your expense. The very people who once stood beside them now kept their distance, unwilling to sink with the ship. They had played the game so well, twisting words, turning people against you, believing they were the masters of deception. But now, the same stage they had set for your downfall had become the scene of their destruction. Poetic, wasn't it? Watching them unravel, watching the weight of their lies crush them under their own arrogance, watching as they turned against each other, clawing for an escape, desperate to shift the blame. But there was no one left to take the fall for them. This was their reckoning. And you stood at the edge of it all, untouchable. They begged. Not at first. At first they fought. Desperate attempts to regain control, to salvage what was left of their crumbling empire. But there was nothing to save. Their words carried no weight anymore. Their threats were empty. The people who once followed them had seen the truth. And that was when the real horror set in. The horror of realizing they were powerless. They had spent so long believing they were the puppet masters, that they could pull the strings and control the story. But now, the strings were cut, and they were left with nothing. And in that moment, when they looked at you with fear in their eyes, they finally understood. They had never been the ones in control. They had been playing a game with someone who had already won before it even started. But you didn't need to destroy them completely. No! The beauty of true revenge isn't in obliteration. It's in letting them live with what they've done. Letting them wake up every day knowing that the world sees them for what they really are. letting them drown in the consequences of their own actions. You could have struck the final blow. You could have crushed them completely, reduced them to nothing. But that would be mercy. And mercy was not something they had ever shown you. So instead, you did the one thing they never expected. You walked away. Because you had already won. Not just a battle, not just a war, but something far greater. You won your freedom. You won your power. You won the right to live without them, without their games, without their chains. And they were left with nothing but the ruins of their own making. That was their true punishment. Because long after you were gone, long after you had moved forward and built something greater, they would still be trapped in the same cage they had tried to put you in. And the best part? They had locked the door themselves. So let them sit there. Let them feel the weight of their own choices. You don't need to watch them suffer, because you already know how their story ends. They set the trap for you. Now, they're the ones who will never escape. And you're free.